Good morning, family. Good morning. I believe that speaker's on, mic's on. Good morning. I'm glad you guys can join. Good morning, Greg. Good morning, Dee Dee. Good morning, Rose. Good morning, Brianna. Good morning, Steve. Good morning, Peter Ann. Good morning, Cheryl. Glad you guys can join. Good morning. If you got any prayer requests, please put them in. We will be praying for you guys. And let's see. And we will get started in 1 minute. Let's see where we are here. Awesome. Awesome. We're starting chapter 3 today. Very good. All right. All right, we can get rolling. So we're doing this study on throughout the minor prophets, and of course we're starting with Hosea, who's the first, and then we'll go in the order in which they are in our canon, which is Hosea, Joel, Amos, Obadiah, Jonah, Micah, Nahum, Habakkuk, Zephaniah, Haggai, Zechariah, and Malachi. And again, they are the minor prophets, not because their voice meant less. They're minor prophets because their writings were less. So it was less amount of information. Absolutely, Didi. We will be praying for him. I'll fill out a card too, so I have everyone praying for him. So the Book of Hosea was written between 740 and 715 BC. We don't know the exact date. His audience was the Northern Kingdom. He's one of the very rare prophets that was their audience. Was Hosea, Amos, and Jonah were all from the Northern Kingdom. Hosea was the only one where his chief audience was primarily and totally the people of the Northern Kingdom. This is after over 200 years since the kingdom has been separated, since Solomon's sons and his servant Rehoboam and Jeroboam separated, one in the Northern Kingdom, one in the Southern Kingdom. Hold on, let me pull this up. Better down here. Okay, yes. So the Northern, the Southern Kingdom, Rehoboam, his son, took the Southern Kingdom, which is Judah. Jeroboam, his servant, took the Northern Kingdom, which became Israel. So it's been 200 years, over a little over 200 years since that separation. And this division caused two separate groups of people, two separate individuals, in which were supposed to be one. After that, Hosea ministers for over 38 years and of a prophetic word declaring to the Northern Kingdom. In his book, chapters 1 through 3 illustrate his marriage. His life was the actual story. Very similar to what we call a testimony today, how people go through trials and difficult times. Some people went through being abused, molested, abandoned, broken, and yet God fixed them and turned them around. And their testimony is, in spite of everything they've been through, that God kept them and brought them to where they are today. Hosea's testimony, his story, is his life. This is what I endured. This is what I went through. And God used it as a symbol to echo a message to a group of people. So chapters 1 through 3 talk about his marriage. Chapters 4 through 14 go into the heart of his message. Good morning, Sharon. Glad you can join. So it kind of gives us a full picture of what's going on with God's people, and that message is told through his marriage. The main themes is God's loyalty to his people, the betrayal of the chosen, God's chosen people choosing other things before him, the marriage to idolatry, the relationship his people decide to have with false gods and with things of this world, choosing material and temporary things over eternal things. The soon coming enemy. Hosea was prophesying that an enemy would come and would seize their land, would take over the people. The unmeasurable grace of God, God's promise to them for a full restoration. We have not seen the full restoration of Israel yet. That will be seen during the millennial kingdom, when Israel and the church become part of Christ's rule and reign on this earth for 1,000 years. And the promise kept. The promise kept is his promises that he'll keep to them as a people and as into a nation. We talked about his children. That he had children. I forgot to upload something. That he had children. The children had names, and those names were given for a particular reason. And those names echoed the seasons or what the people would endure. And I think I have that here. So we talked about the children. His children, the first would be Jezreel, which means to scatter. God would scatter the people. And as you see, a few years later, Assyrians take over, and the people are scattered and brought abroad and scattered to different places. The next one was Lo Ruhama, which means not pitied, which means God didn't show mercy on them in this season. He allowed this to happen, which also declares the sovereignty of God, that he can choose. I'll have mercy upon whom I have mercy. He can choose the time and the seasons in which he allows something to happen. And Lo Ami, which means not my people, a temporary separation of God declaring him as their people because they chose to worship something else or someone else. And we went through chapter 2, and chapter 2 covered God brings charges against his people, which we'll see continues in chapter 3. He pleads with the faithful remnant, that there's some that are still faithful, to convince the others to put away their idols. God gives, the people give the idols credit for what God has done. They begin worshiping things that God made and using things that God made to sacrifice to their idols. God saying, I gave you the grain, the oil, and the increase, the silver and the gold. And then you take what I've given you and you sacrifice it towards idols. Excuse me, it is early. He sacrificed it towards idols. They will find that idols fail them. They'll find that idols will not meet their needs. And then they want to return back to their God. They want to return back after the idols failed to meet their needs, after the idols failed to meet their requirements. Good morning, Sharon. Good morning, Marie. Glad you guys can join. So also in chapter 2, God calls his people back. In the valley of Achor, which means trouble, the valley of Achor, there will be a door of hope. We read the valley of Achor in Joshua when the people chose idolatry and they kept the accursed things in their home from the lands they'd taken over, and God judged them. Not only did he have them stone the man that committed the sin, but his family, his children, his sons, his goats, his sheep, his wife, everything attached to him was destroyed because of idolatry. There's a symbol that idolatry is the main thing in our world today. Everyone worships something. Even the atheists worship something, whether it's money, whether it's his ability or belief that he is right all the time, whether it's fame, wealth. Idols are all over the place. And back then, for the idols, the penalty for idol is execution. And God tells his people that in the middle of the valley of Achor, where your idolatry should lead to execution, I will bring a door of hope. And that door of hope will be Jesus Christ. The transition happened from my master, which is Bali, to my husband, which is Ishi. That happened in chapter 2. That lines up with Isaiah 54. Your maker is your husband, Isaiah 54:5. The promise of a full restoration. It said they will be the depicting of the millennial kingdom. They will have a full restoration of their people and of God's promises. So we've got all these things taking place, and now we enter into chapter 3. Let's take a look here. We're going to start in chapter 3, verse 1. Good morning, Kathy. We'll start in chapter 3, Hosea chapter 3, verse 1. And God again begins bringing up his charges against Israel. And it says this, Then the Lord said to me, Go again, love a woman who is loved by a lover and is committing adultery, just like the love of the Lord for the children of Israel, who look to other gods to love the raisin cakes of the pagans. So I brought her for myself for 15 shekels of silver and 1½ homes of barley. And I said to her, you shall stay with me many days. You shall not play the harlot. Nor shall you have a man. So too will I be toward you. For the children of Israel shall abide many days without king or prince, without sacrifice or sacred pillar, without ephod or teraphim. Afterward, the children of Israel shall return and seek the Lord their God and David their king. They shall make the fear of the Lord and his goodness in the latter days. They shall fear the Lord and his goodness in the latter days. And that's it. Chapter 3 is nice and short, a nice compact chapter. So we'll start looking at this and seeing all the different pieces that are included in this text. So going up to chapter 3, verse 1, God starts with bringing charges against them. Again, as he did in chapter 2, he brings up these charges. The Lord said unto me, go again. And this is showing God calling back for Israel. So this is Israel's returning back to God. Israel getting a chance to return back to God. So the Lord said, go again, love a woman who is loved by a lover and is committing adultery. So who God is describing is not another woman. He's describing Gomer. At this point, Hosea separated from his wife, Gomer, and God is saying, I know she's separated from you. I know she's idolatrous. I know she chose. I know she left you. I know she wanted something else. The same way in verse 2 where she said, all the things my lovers are failing me. Let me go back to my first one. Let me return. At this time, same time, God is telling Gomer, go love a woman that's committing adultery. So he's asking him, I want you to go get your wife back. I know what she's done. I know how far she's off. I know how terrible it is, her actions, but I want you to go get her back. So he tells her to go get her back. And a key thing is that he doesn't say go get back your wife. He says go get a woman that's caught in adultery, because Gomer has no claim to be his wife any longer, the same way Israel had no claim to be his people any longer. I'm going after you in your fallen state, not in your perfected one. I'm going after you according to how you have been named. The same way, see the names of the children. Scattered, you've been scattered amongst multiple lovers. Lo Rami, you're not pitied. I'm not sure. There's no pity for you. And Lo Ami, you're not my people. So he didn't say go get your wife back. Go get a woman who's caught in adultery. And he's insinuating to her he's not getting another wife. He's going to get Gomer back. At this point, he's lost her. And chapter 2 tells us that she now has multiple lovers. She's after multiple things. Multiple things have tickled her ears or enchanted her or told, and she's seen such beauty in such temporary things that they have taken her, and she's fallen in love with these things. And it's easy for people to fall in love with temporary things. You should appreciate temporary things. They should be appreciated. We should be thankful to God for all the temporary blessings we have. And we should be able to use those temporary blessings to be a blessing to somebody else. But we should be appreciative. The moment we worship them, the reason why we live is to accomplish that. The reason why we live is to have that. The moment that becomes the desired outcome of our efforts, and not for God to be glorified, for his word to go forward, for his kingdom to be established, for our loved ones to hear the gospels, for our neighbors to hear the gospel, for us to show hospitality and have people over our homes to share God's love with them. The moment that's not a primary, and the primary is just how much stuff we can get, then we've missed the entire point, and we're no longer sharing the truth of the gospel. Gomer fell in love with many things. And because of that, he's saying, go find a woman of adultery, not your wife, because she can no longer claim to be your wife, the same way Israel could no longer claim me to be their God. You can't say you love me while worshiping everything else. Those that are not his people. So he gives them this perfect image of what you're going after, what you're trying to get back. The very thing that denied you is the very thing you're going to go back and get. And imagine the humility that takes. Imagine the humility of your spouse laying with many lovers, and then you going to ask them back, you going after them. They left you for something that they thought was better. Adam and Eve left him for something that they thought was better. Lust of the eyes, lust of the flesh, lust of the fruit. They lusted after something, and they didn't think, they weren't deceived. They were deceived by Satan, but they were fully aware. Hey, if you eat this apple, you won't die. You become like God, and that's what they wanted. That's what the human being wants today. That's what we declare today. I'm the greatest. Who's the greatest? I'm the best. We declare that today. We want to be like God, but in the wrong way. God wants us to be like Christ, but not in the way where you're going to usurp him. So the this relationship symbolizes such a humility of coming back, and that's why when Jesus came, remember, to come back for something that left you, man, that's humility. It's not the person that cheated coming back. It's the person who was cheated on going after the cheater. It's the person who was robbed going after the thief, not to destroy them, to embrace them, to love them. So what humility? That's why Christ came as the lamb. If he would have came as the lion the first time, he would have killed all of us. He came as the lamb. I'm coming humble. Because I'm going to offer a salvation for a people who has gone away from me. I'm going to offer a salvation to a world that lives in darkness and show them what light is. And so he says, find this woman who's been loved by another, who's caught in the acts of adultery. And Hosea buys her back. He buys her back, and he buys her back in a unique way. And he tells him the comparison in verse 1. The Lord said to me, go again, love a woman who is loved by a lover and committing adultery, just like the love of the Lord for the children of Israel. So he says, it's just like this. It's just like the love that I have for the children of Israel, who took other gods and loved the raisin cakes of the pagans. Now, raisin cakes were used in forms of Canaanite worship. So it's not that they have something against raisins or making a cake. You can go ahead and make your raisin muffins. It was because the raisin cakes were used as part of the Canaanite worship of Canaanite gods. That's why it says the raisin cakes of the pagans. You enjoy these things. So he tells them the exact comparison, just like the love that your God has for the children of Israel. Go get this woman that's committing adultery, that has multiple lovers and left you for those lovers, and go back and get her, just like I love the children of Israel, just like I am doing for them right now. I'm going to go back and get the very things and the very ones who betrayed me. So it's a beautiful example of God's absolute undying love and his unchanging love towards his people. So here is his call back for them in verse 2. It says, so I bought her for myself for 15 shekels of silver, 1 1/2 omers of barley. I said to her, you shall stay with me many days. You shall not play the harlot. You shall not have a man. So too will I be toward you. So he paid, notice the key point, he had to pay a price to get her back. He had to pay a price to get her back because of what she had a relationship with. God paid a price for humanity because of what we had a relationship with. Our relationship was with sin. Because we had a relationship with sin, the wages of sin is death. So we were all doomed to die. So if the wages of sin is death and we had to pay it, then we had what's called the doctrine of substitutionary atonement. Christ came and said, you owe a wage of death. What I will do, I will live the righteousness that Adam could not live. And then I will pay the wage of death. And since the wages of sin is death, and I did not commit a sin, death has no right to hold me. So as I enter into the realm of death, I'm still king. I'm still God. Death had no right to take me. So since death took the Savior, whatever realm I walk into, I reign. So I entered into death, reigned, and took the keys of hell, death, and the grave, and rose in victory. So I reign over everything. I went to pay a wage of death, but I never committed a sin, so I shouldn't have got the wage. You got the wage. I went and paid what you owed. So it shows his absolute love and his absolute mercies towards humanity. Hey, Barbie. Glad you can join. So it shows his absolute love, his absolute the wondrous love he has shown unto humanity for the sacrifice. And now he's asking Gomer to do the same. Imagine what humility that takes. Listen, your husband or your wife, they cheated on you with multiple lovers that live in your community, that have houses around where you live. They've gone and done this. And now I'm not saying they want you back. I'm saying for you to go after them. That takes a humility. That takes a love of that person that is just unmoving, unwavering. And Gomer is doing this for his wife, and he had to pay a price for her. He had to pay a price from whatever owned her. So at this time, she was probably sold or bought into probably slavery, probably sex slavery. And he had to go buy her. So she now has a master. The idea is of sin becomes a master to you because you have to pay its wages. Its wages is death. It's going to own you until you die. Gomer committed sins, and now she has a master. She has an individual that's owning her. And now to get her back, Hosea has to pay the wage required to get her back. And this wage happened to be of what he could give. What he paid is here. It says, so I brought her back to myself, Hosea chapter 3, verse 2. So I bought her back, not bought her back for myself, 15 shekels of silver, and 1.5 omers of barley. The idea of the purchase is it didn't make a difference if something belonged to you. If it actually went and attached itself to something else, you'd still have to pay a price for it back. Is a anecdotal story. A single dad, his wife passed away, and he's raising his son. His son is young, 13, 14 years old, and the dad is a carpenter who lives on a farm. He does everything he can to fix people's farms, fences, build barns. He's a craftsman. So his son picks up on these things, and his son loves going out to work with dad after school, or working on projects with him. And the son, the dad used to carve little boats and put them on the lake for the son to watch and see them. So the son began carving his first boat. He carved his boat and created it. And the son was so excited. And the father was so excited to see him and his son work together, and they created this thing, this boat. And the son put the boat out on the lake, and he's watching it. Him and the father are watching the thing that they created. They shaped with their own hands. They formed it, and they're watching it. And all of a sudden, a strong wind came, and that wind hit that boat, and it took it away from them down the lake into the main body of water, and they lost it. They lost the very thing that they created. 3 weeks later, the father says, I'm going into town. I need to get some supplies for the wood shop. The son comes with him. They walk past a thrift shop, and the son turns, and he grabs the father's arm and says, look, Dad, in the window of the thrift store is the very thing we created. And he sees the very thing he created in the thrift store. He sees the very thing that him and his father formed and shaped. And they go into the thrift store, and the son goes to the owner and said, Sir, I know you're the owner of this shop, and everything that's in here is yours, but that boat in the window, you see, me and my father created that. We took it out of nothing, and we formed it. We shaped it. We carved it. We gave it purpose. I gave it the ability to float upon water. I gave it the ability to sustain. I created that. So I'm asking, can you give me that back? The store owner said, I found that floating down the riverbank one day. He goes, and since it came to me, I didn't force it. It came to me. I'm the rightful owner. No difference in Gomer coming to various lovers to leave God. No difference in the children of Israel going to various idols and lovers to leave God. Because it came to them, they now have a new master. So the store owner says, it's mine now. I'm the new owner. It's mine. But if you want it, it's $15. And the father and the son left. The son went home, and for the next 2 weeks, The son went to school, and after school, he'd come home and he'd work odd jobs. He'd mend fences, and working all night, cutting his hands on nails and sharp, damaged fences. He'd clean yards. He'd rake up barns. He picked up after horses for other neighbors. He went neighbor to neighbor, and he actually put time, sweat, and blood into it. And he earned his $15, and he came back, and he bought back the very thing him and his father created. He paid a price to buy back what they created. No difference than Hosea going back to pay a price back to the very thing that left him, Gomer. God paying a price to get the very ones that left him back, Israel. This boy paying a price to get the very thing back that he created, his boat. And the father looked at the son and said, you know what, I'm more proud of you now than I was when we first created the boat. And the son said, why? I lost, it left me. Why would you be proud of me now? Father said, because you realized that even though you created something, the moment it got away from you, you were willing to pay the price to get it back. It is the price of redemption. So this price has been paid to get back what was lost, even though it was created. So just because you created it doesn't mean that you don't have to pay a price to get it back when it gets away from you. God put that demonstration out there for us. So this Hosea is in this position now where he's going to pay a price to get back his bride. And the bride didn't come looking to get him back. He went after her. He went to take her and to get back his bride. And he says something unique about his payment method. So I brought for myself 15 shekels of silver and 1.5 homers of barley. Very rarely do you pay for something with two types of revenue unless you're short on one and they'll accept a substitute. So normally silver is what's desired. You want silver. You want 30 shekels of silver. Obviously, he didn't have full payment, so he gave 15 shekels of silver, and then he bartered with barley. I'll give you this barley. And some believe it's symbolic. Silver normally in the Bible represents wealth, glory, something shiny, and barley represents just something plain of the earth. That he paid a price that was something that was glorious and yet was of the earth. And Christ being fully God, glorious, and fully man of the earth. So this price was paid, and he paid two types. And normally it is because you didn't have enough silver to pay the full amount. So he bartered to pay the other barley. 1.5 homers. We don't know the exact measurement of homers, but we do believe 1.5 should be around 15 shekels of silver, because 30 shekels of silver is truly what you would need to buy back a slave. And when I look at that, the reason why 1.5 homers is assumed to be 15 shekels, we'll look at that because there was a buyback system. So Gomer is going to buy back his lover, and he has to go according to a buyback system of what a shekel would do. So now he's buying back a woman. She's a woman who is enslaved to another master. So normally to buy her back, you need 30 shekels. He had 15 shekels, 1.5 homers. So we believe in the 1.5 homers equal the other 15. But go to Exodus 21:28, just to show you where the purchase system is from. Did I put it in there? Yep. Exodus 21:28. Let me pull it up over here. Exodus 21-28 starts and reads this. If an ox gores a man or a woman to death, then the ox shall surely be stoned, and its flesh shall not be eaten, but the owner of the ox shall be acquitted. But if an ox tended to thrust with its horn in past times, and it has been made known to his owner, and he has not kept it confined, so that he has not killed a man or a woman, the ox shall be stoned, and its owner shall be put to death. So this is showing the actual system of how animals were treated if they gored or hurt a human being. Verse 30, if there is imposed on him a sum of money, then he shall pay to redeem his life whatever is imposed on him. Whether it has gored a son or gored a daughter, according to his judgment, shall be done to them. Now watch 32. If an ox gores a male or female servant, so here's your servant, this is your slave. Gomer was a slave or a servant to what she went into. Israel was a slave to sin. The penalty was death. Gomer was a slave to a person. Now what's the penalty? How much do you pay to get her back? If your ox gores a male or female servant, he shall go give their master 30 shekels of silver, and the ox will be stoned. 30 shekels of silver is what you would pay if your animal accidentally killed a female servant, because that was the price value of the female servant, 30 shekels. Hosea paid 15 shekels plus 1.5 ohms of barley. So the assumption is that 1.5 ohms of barley would equal 15 shekels, that he did not have the full amount in silver. So it was common that price range was based off of the Old Testament rules and laws. Go to Leviticus 27. Leviticus 27, 1 through 4. Leviticus 27, 1 through 4 says, Now the Lord spoke to Moses. So this is God speaking to Moses. Speak to the children of Israel and say to them, when a man consecrates by a vow certain persons to the Lord, according to your valuation, if your valuation is of a male from 20 years old up to 60 years old, then your valuation shall be 50 shekels of silver. So let's make sure we're clear about what God is saying. He's telling him, if you consecrate something unto the Lord, which means you take it and you set it aside for God, by a vow, how you would consecrate is by a vow. You would give your vow. I am going to take this child and I'm going to give him to the house of God all the days of his life, though he will live there. He's no longer belonging to my household. He belongs to God. Whatever you give, you vow unto God that you give to him. So he says, if a person consecrates in a vow and they give you a person, I want to show you the value that should be in exchange for that person. If the valuation is a male from 20 years old to 60 years old, then the valuation shall be 50 shekels of silver, according to the shekel of the sanctuary, according to the weight, what the sanctuary calls a shekel. Not according to false weights or different cities or different places has different weights. So they're going by the shekel of the sanctuary. If it's a female, then your valuation shall be 30 shekels. And from 5 years old to 20 years old, your valuation of a male shall be 20 shekels. And for a female that's 5 years old to 20 years old, it shall be 10 shekels. And if it's 1 month old or 5 years old, it shall be 5 shekels. A female shall be 3 shekels. So he's giving them a price point value on things that will be consecrated unto God. That'll say, I want to give this person to the temple for the rest of their life. We've set them aside for that. And what you would give to that person for that to redeem that person. So a male from 20 to 60 years old was 50 shekels. Nice job, guys. 50 shekels, not bad. A female from 20 to 60 was 30 shekels. All right, ladies? Next time you see your husband, just give him a little nod and say, how you doing, 50? He's 50 shekels. He's top of the food chain. He's 50 shekels. So he's worth 50 shekels. A female was 30 shekels. A male child from 5 to 20 is 20 shekels, and a male child from 5 to 20, a female child is from 5 to 20 is 10 shekels. So next time your kids get online, like, listen, I brought you into this world. I can take you out for 10 shekels. Just let them know and keep them in line. So the shekel value was to decide if something was consecrated to God. And this is what God spoke to Moses. If something was consecrated to God. This is the value of that gift that was given to you to be used for God's will and God's intention based off shekel weight. And if you notice, the female shekel was 30 shekels to actually for a woman to be consecrated unto God, and for the price to be paid for that woman being given to the sanctuary, you'd pay out 30 shekels. The purchase back a woman that was a slave, as we saw before in Exodus, the price was 30 shekels. You'd have to actually purchase by the shekels. So you actually paid that. So 30 shekels was a common set price by the law to what you would pay to get back a female servant. If that female was taken, whether she went by herself or she went forcefully. If you wanted her back, that was the price. So Hosea is in a position where now he has to pay back the price, pay the shekels required to get back what was lost. And what was lost, he did not push away. What was lost left him, but he was still willing to pay the price to get it back. What God lost was not pushed away. What God lost chose to leave him, but he still paid the price to get it back. He paid the price to get back humanity, back into relationship. He paid the price to return man back to what Adam lost in the garden, which was an intimate relationship with the God who created them. So he states this price, he pays this price, and he tells them, go back to Hosea chapter 3, verse 2. So I bought her for myself with 15 shekels of silver and 1.5 homers of barley. And I said to her, you shall stay with me for many days. You shall not play the harlot. You shall not have a man. So too will I be towards you. So he's saying, he's telling her that you're going to stay with me for a period of time. And there'll be a gap in intimacy. Number one, you're not going to do your old things. You're not going to play the harlot. Number two, you're not going to sleep with a man. You're not going to have that type of intimacy with a man yet. And he says, so too, I'll be with you. I'm not going to lay with you either. This is called a purification or depravity period, where he's saying, I'm going to work on cleansing you and making you just again. What I'm doing is I'm forming you into a bride. So I'm not going to lay with you before the actual ceremony. I'm forming you into the bride. I'm fulfilling Isaiah 54:5. Your maker is your husband. I'm fulfilling New Testament truth, where you are the bride of Christ. And one day the king returns, and he returns for a bride without spot or wrinkle. I'm preparing you as a bride. So Hosea does this to Gomer and speaks this to her. And he says, for the children of Israel shall abide many days without king or prince, without sacrifice or sacred pillar, without ephod or teraphim. Afterward, the children of Israel shall return and seek the Lord their God and David their king. They shall fear the Lord and his goodness in the latter days. So a few things. He says, for the children of Israel shall abide many days without king or prince. He begins taking away the basic pillars that he first set up for them to operate by. He removes a couple of things. He removes kings. He removes pillars. He removes the sacrifice or sacred pillars. He removes the ephod. He removes the teraphim. So one of the things that are very unique with what's being removed here is what's called a teraphim. And basically a teraphim is a household god. Teraphim became popular amongst the Canaanites, also the Assyrians. Teraphim is a household god or a small idol, something that you can hold in your household. Not the large idol that sits outside because it's 6 feet or 30 feet high, but a small idol that it's an image of the actual idol that you can have in your home. So it's amazing that he tells them that there's a blending of beliefs, because he says, not only will you not have the things that I ordained for you, ephod, sacrifices, king or prince, but the other things that you mixed in with it, the teraphim and the sacred pillars. Sacred pillars not only were used for sacrifices and to idolize false gods, there were also some used in the Bible with God's people. Along with the teraphim was used in a few places in our Bible. Go to Genesis 31:22. So to give you a little backdrop on the story, Jacob fled with his wife because his wife's father, or his father-in-law, Laban, accused him of multiplying his flock greater than his, which he did, but he did not do it illegally. He actually took the bad sheep and was able to use certain methods of placing them before the rod and creating a cleaner sheep and a bountiful sheep, a bountiful flock. So, but Laban is also accusing him of something else because he found something missing. So Laban went after him. David pitched his tent On the mountains, Laban pitched next to him. And in verse 26, Laban said to Jacob, "What have you done that you have stolen away unknown to me, and carried away my daughters like captives taken with the sword? Why did you flee away secretly and steal away from me, and not tell me that I might have sent you away with joy, singing, timbrel, and harps?" So Laban's accusing him of saying, "Why did you run away?" And Jacob actually responds, "I thought you were trying to kill me. I don't know why you were chasing me in the first place." And then in verse 29, "It is in my power to do harm, but the God of your father spoke to me last night." This is Laban saying, "I would kill you, but the God of your father actually spoke to me last night." It's amazing. God is speaking to the people that's trying to kill Jacob. It's amazing how God can work. So the one trying to kill Jacob, God speaks to them and says, "You will not touch him, or you will not do harm to him. Be careful that you speak neither good nor bad." In verse 30, "And now you have surely gone because you greatly long for your father's house, but why do you steal my gods?" So here's why Laban is upset. He's upset because he's accusing Jacob of stealing his gods. So he's telling them, "I'm upset because you're stealing my gods. You're actually taking from me. You're stealing from my." And what is he asking Jacob for? What is he saying Jacob stole? What he's claiming Jacob stole. And then Jacob responds in verse 31. "And then Jacob answered and said, because I was afraid, for I said, perhaps you would take your daughters from my face, with whomever you find your gods, do not let him live. In the presence of your brethren, identify what I have that's yours and take it for you." For Jacob did not know that Rachel had stolen them. So now Jacob does not know that his wife Rachel stole false gods, because she still believed that you needed a teraphim, an idol god, to be in your household for blessing. She still combined that with the presence of God. So she stole them. And she hid them in the horse's saddle. As you read 33 to 35, she hid them in the horse's saddle so that when they searched through their stuff, they couldn't find it, because they searched everything except they didn't bother searching the horse's saddle. And she never told. After the father left and made peace with them and said, "I was wrong to accuse you. You didn't steal my gods," when they actually did steal their gods, Rachel stole the false god. And that word there for God was the teraphim. It was an idol god that people carried with them. Now, there's certain things that the Bible tells us about that that we still have them today. Go to 1 Samuel 15, verse. I put 10, but we'll slide down. 1 Samuel 15. So they compare something. Verse 10, "Now the word of the Lord came to Samuel, saying, I greatly regret that I set up Saul as king, for he has turned from following me, and has not performed my commandments. And it grieved Samuel, and he cried out to the Lord all night. So when Samuel rose early in the morning to meet Saul, it was told Samuel, saying, Saul went to Carmel, and indeed he set up a monument for himself. And he has gone around, passed by, and gone down to Gilgal. Then Samuel went to Saul, and Saul said to him, Blessed are you of the Lord. I have performed the commandment of the Lord." So Saul went and did all these things, made a monument to himself, made his own worship unto himself. And then he sees Samuel come, and he says, Blessed are you of the Lord. I have performed the commandment of the Lord. So doing his will and try to connect it to doing God's will. But Samuel said, Then what is the bleating of sheep in my ears, the lowing of the oxen which I hear? Because Samuel knew what God's will was. God's will was to destroy everything, take nothing back. But Saul took it and made a monument to himself. And Saul said, They have brought me from the Amalekites, for the people who spared the best of the sheep, the oxen, to sacrifice to the Lord your God. The rest we will utterly destroy. So now Saul begins telling Samuel how we're going to do it. I know God said destroy everything, but I think God missed a few key pointers here. I think we keep the best, we sacrifice some to God, and then we utterly destroy the rest. So God's plan was a little bit off, but don't worry, I helped him adjust it. Then Samuel said, be quiet. I love that. Verse 16. Samuel said to Saul, be quiet, and I will tell you what the Lord your God said to me last night. He said to him, speak on. So Samuel said, when you were little in your own eyes, you were not the head of the tribes of Israel, and did not the Lord anoint you king over Israel? Now the Lord sent you on a mission and said, go and utterly destroy the sinners, the Amalekites, and fight against them until they are consumed. Why then do you not obey the voice of the Lord? Why do you swoop down on the spoil and do evil in the sight of the Lord? And Saul said to Samuel, but I have obeyed the voice of the Lord and gone on the mission in which the Lord has sent me and brought back Agag, the king of Amalek, and I have utterly destroyed the Amalekites, but the people took of the plunder, sheep and oxen, the best things which should have been utterly destroyed to sacrifice to the Lord your God in Gilgal. So now Saul continues to defend himself. He tells him, I defeated the Amalekites, but the people took back the good stuff. Well, I just told you not to take back the good stuff, to destroy everything, but Saul has other plans. And Samuel said this to him. He said, the Lord your God, has the Lord as great delight in burnt offerings and sacrifices as in obeying the voice of the Lord. Behold, to obey is better than sacrifice, and to heed than that the fat of rams. And he says a key point, 23. For rebellion is as the sin of witchcraft, and stubbornness is as iniquity and idolatry. The word for idolatry there was teraphim. So stubbornness is the same thing as having a household god. He tells them that stubbornness, people say, well, we don't have idols today. Oh, God says stubbornness is the same thing as having a household god. The moment God gives direction and correction and we still don't listen because we still have our own ways and our own methods, he says stubbornness is the same thing as having a household god. You're choosing to have something that I intended you not to have, or go away that I intended you not to go. He's not talking about people just committing a sin, but idolatrous actions. He compares to people being absolutely stubborn against God's ways and stubborn against God's direction. So he uses this as a sign to show that, hey, this thing still exists. There's a stubbornness, and it's just as bad as idolatry. So don't brag about not being idolatrous when you have stubbornness, because it is the same thing. And he tells them in Hosea chapter 3, verse 4, the children of Israel shall abide many days without king or prince, without sacrifice or sacred pillar, without ephod or teraphim, removing everything from them. Afterwards, the children of Israel shall return and seek the Lord their God and David their king. When it says David their king, it's not talking about actual physical David, because David has been dead for 300-400 years at this point. He's telling them David their king. In other words, the lineage of David that will bring forth the child of the Messiah. Now, right now, the northern tribe is separated from the lineage because the southern tribe is the one being run by Solomon's son. Solomon's son is the only true lineage of David. The northern kingdom didn't have that lineage of David because they were following a king that was not from the line. So he's promising them that one day the nations will come back together underneath one, and then through this lineage, David, a king will come, and that king that will come will actually put the actual kingdoms back together. The north and the southern kingdom will come back together as one piece. So what version am I reading from? This is the NASB, and the other version is New King James Version. I usually use both, but I think this is New King James Version is what I'm reading right now. So this is when we see the actual the understanding of God is calling back to, he's using Hosea's marriage and his life as an imagery of what's happening to his people. And he's telling him that afterward, the children of Israel will return. They'll seek the Lord and David their king, or the lineage of David, where Messiah will come. They shall fear the Lord and his goodness in the latter days. So he's talking to them about the latter days, that in the latter days there shall be a return back to the promise of the Messiah that comes through David's line. It'll be it's a far-reaching prophecy of the two kingdoms coming back to be one, and it'll be joined by Christ being the king over this nation. You'll see the full unity of Israel during the millennial kingdom, where God actually bridges the gap back of this kingdom, with the northern kingdom and the southern kingdom actually come together. Israel in the north and Judah in the south, and the kingdoms come back together. God will return. And when the king returns, he will establish a millennial kingdom on this earth, and he will do it in Jerusalem on David's Temple Mount. He will reestablish his kingdom. And at that point, both Jews and Gentiles that are part of the church era, and Jews and proselytes, or proselytes with the Gentiles of their days from the past eras, will come together, and we will rule underneath this great King Jesus for the 1,000 years. We establish his kingdom on this earth. So chapter 4 is you see the beauty of God's mercies, of God being willing to pay the price to bring something back into a relationship with him, of his kindness towards his people, and his faithfulness that does not waver. His faithfulness that is just unwavering, unending. It's beautiful. But we will stop there. Next week, we will continue on chapter 4. And we'll be back on Wednesday of next week to continue on chapter 4. We had an awesome time last night at the young adults. We started our young adults group. We had 14 or 15 young adults come out, and we had a great time as we are going through the book of Romans. And through that, line by line, we're going to learn how to explain the fullness of our faith. So great time, awesome time. If you got any prayer requests, please put them in. I did see some, and love you guys. Let's close out in prayer as a family. Father, we thank you for this day. We thank you for your mercies and your kindness, Father God. Lord, we pray that you continue to guide us, direct us, and use us for your glory. We thank you that you came for us, that you came and offered a price to redeem humanity back into a relationship with you. We're honored today to be sons and daughters of your kingdom, and we thank you for your mercies, your kindness, and your forgiveness. Be with your children. Use them for your glory this week, Father God. Let them know that you are smiling at them. It's okay to smile back. In Jesus' name, amen. God bless, family. Have an awesome week. If you need anything, please reach out to me. We are here for you guys. Love you guys, and we will talk to you soon. God bless.